Jack Hinman, welcome to Stories from the Field.
How you doing, Will?
I'm doing very well. And you're Dr. Jack Hinman. I should be stand corrected.
Yes, yeah. You have to call me Dr. Jack throughout this whole podcast. I make
Dr. Hinman.
everybody, yes, Dr. Hinman. I make my kids do it. Like, if I could save your life, Will, then you could call me a doctor. But what I could do is I can make you feel good about passing away, but I can't save your life. So if I could save your life, then you can start calling me a doctor, but just call me Jack.
Well, when people ask me like, "Oh, should I call you doctor?" I'm like, "No, because I got that because I had really low self-esteem, and I thought going through the process of getting a doctorate would make me feel more confident. But afterwards, I was just the same insecure person as I was going into the process. So we're both on the same page related to that. And you, but you've been in the helping profession a long time, pre-doctorate. And let's talk about what you're doing first, foremost right now, Engage Transitions, which supports young adults. Tell us about that, where it is, how long you've been doing it, etc.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're located in Cedar City, Utah, which is southern Utah. And man, it's like the way you describe Cedar City is where northern Utah meets southern Utah. Like literally the dirt is red, but you've got bigger pine trees. So you got the northern Utah and you got the red rock coming together. I like strategically, intentionally live in Cedar because of the outdoor component. I'm an avid mountain biker. I love to snowboard. I can literally mountain bike all year round. I can these are the tough decisions I make on the weekends during the winter time. Do I go snowboarding today or do I go mountain biking today? Oh, I'll switch up and go snowboarding tomorrow and mountain bike today. You can literally snowboard and mountain bike in the same day. I'm not kidding you.
That's pretty
And
cool.
so, yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like we have St. George, which is like 45 minutes away, altitude 3,000 feet, beautiful red rock. You've got Brine Head, which is at 10,000 feet. So you've got the notable altitude change that creates that. So Cedar City is also a college town. It's Southern Utah University is the college. So you have the college component and you have the outdoor component. So I really feel like we're leveraging both parts of that with young adults at Engage. So young adults can attend college. They could be accessing the outdoors. And also Cedar is about 50 to 60,000 people. It's manageable. Literally, you have to be looking for trouble to find it. And where you like, and so you don't have this like overt in your face drug culture. You have a safe, manageable environment. So, so Engage Young Adult Transition is a therapeutic setting for young adults to have notable anxiety, depression, executive functioning difficulties, avoidance. Typically, about half of young adults fall in the ASD1 space. But at some level, when you're struggling to move into adulthood and your mental health is really freezing you in that process, delaying you in that process, you all have some degree of executive functioning, like difficulties. When you have depression, anxiety, you're still in that space. So, so with Engage, our intention is to provide a high clinical offering while you're living your life. I often tell our young adults like, hey, actually coming to Engage is not slowing you down. It's actually moving you forward. A lot of young adults are like, oh my gosh, I got to go to another program. I got to go to treatment. I'm putting my life on hold. I'm not able to do what I really want to do and those things. In reality, you're moving more forward in your life in a therapeutic setting like Engage than you are definitely at home. So our young adults are getting individual therapy, family therapy. We're doing parent coaching. We're doing neurofeedback. We're doing group therapy. We have case management. We have a dietitian. We have a nurse. We have a psychiatric nurse practitioner. We have a large clinical kind of like team support around them, but not a clinical container. So our young adults need a high level of clinical support, but they don't need to be in a contained environment. And so I explained to young adults that, hey, you're using Engage. You're not at Engage to get out of Engage. You're using Engage to move forward in that process.
Wow. Wow. You're truly inspired by Engage. How long's it been around? Because I know you were one of the founders. How long's it been
We're
around?
we've been around for 3 years. And the cool thing is we open on on Father's Day. So
Wow.
we had a young adult that wanted to actually start their journey and their time with us early. So we open on Father's Day. So I have this kind of cool moment where it's my child and I'm a father to engage and we open on Father's Day. It's pretty cool.
And are how did you get into the helping profession? What kinda drew you to this work?
Man, that answer to that question has evolved. I think I've finally been honest with myself about what led me to that. And in the reality in that is that where I grew up in a fairly chaotic home environment. And somebody was looking out for me while I was in high school. And I developed these really strong connections with friends in high school that I have strong connections with today. Literally, I grew up in Memphis. I just went to Memphis a couple weeks ago to go spend some time with one of my closest friends, went to an outdoor music festival and really see the power of connection and the power of friendship and community is what has been the consistent thread in my life. And you throw the mountain bike component in that, where my buddy, we started mountain biking in high school. We moved out west and continued that passion for the outdoors and mountain biking and connection and community while living out west in a sense. And so seeing the impact of friendship and connection and seeing how young adults today are desperately struggling in that space is what's driving me in that, in the field of mental health. And so this seeing the power of connection and wanting to help others through my own personal experience.
So was it an easy path? Did you say, "Okay, I found my tribe. Now I'm gonna go to undergraduate, study psychology, then go get my PsyD." What was your path? And obviously the outdoors and hanging out with other friends, including men in the outdoors, because men, this is the season where I'm talking about boys and men in the outdoors. A little more dig in because I can be transparent. Part of the reason my story has changed too as I've gotten older through having therapy and dealing with more issues in my life and knowing that my mom had some significant mental health issues and I was the caretaker. And so it was easy for me to become, it was predestined. I was trained at a early age to do that. And will you share a little bit more about what you were saying? Well, it's changed over time.
Yeah, I think the thing is that what gravitated me to the field was where I took a psychology class and a professor took interest in me. And so I think I was primed and ready for somebody to see something in me. Then that professor asked me hey, would you be willing to be a TA next semester? And I never saw myself in that kind of particular role. I barely graduated high school, literally. I'm a doctor in clinical psychology. I barely graduated high school. I had to take all those pre 100 courses at college just to get up to speed in college. But seeing that process of myself, wanted to give back and really wanted to see it in other people as well. And then as I evolved, I think it became more honest with that process where I started really looking at the way my family role and my family systems had an impact in that process. And man, I'm sorry, Will, I'm just struggling. I'm trying with that
Well,
question.
you
Help
got a
me out.
lot of stuff going on. You got a lot of
Yeah,
stuff going on. You
yeah.
got your phone's going, and you are a very. I can see you're very kinesthetic. You're very experiential. Do you want to continue on, or is there too much going on for you right now?
Yeah, no, I love to. The thing is, my son right now is going through college orientation, and I'm getting all
Ooh.
these app requests for him to download apps to do while he's literally in the middle of the college orientation. So I'm in a flow, and then all of a sudden I'm getting requests
Ding.
because I know, and he's 18 years old. I need to get the password off his phone so he doesn't have to get dad's permission to download an app for college. He's literally
Yeah.
right now. at the University of Utah going through that college orientation. So the cool thing is it's like I'm in this young adult space and then my son's paralleling it too. And it's really
Yeah.
cool to see that as well. And but no, like going back to the original kind of question and got off my flow with all these app requests that my son is getting from like his college orientation.
Why,
Yeah,
that's cool, right? That and
yeah, no,
having had 2 sons to go through that process, and I understand.
yeah, no. And I'm like so ADHD. I'll get like that. And I swear I turned off all these things for notification on my phone. But the thing is that, yeah, where I was an only child, like growing up home. And so a lot of the chaos, I absorbed it in my home. And my way out of it was friendship. And my way out of it was connection. And so I think if anybody knows me, probably it's one of my superpowers is the number of friends I have and the ability to make connections with people. It's funny, if you see me at a conference, Will, I'm like buzzing all over the place. I get excited. Like you and I had a chance to connect like a couple of months ago at a
Yeah.
conference and I was buzzing around and speaking at a presentation. And so I love meeting new people. I love helping other people to connect and build relationships. And I think going back to what's happening in our culture right now is that there's like a crisis connection, a connection and a crisis in connecting. And if I look at my own development and my own identity is really related to the relationships I have. And like when you don't have that reflection in friendship and connection, you don't figure out who you are. So young people are not connecting, which is causing a severe identity crisis as well. Because like when you hang out with people, I didn't know that. You figure out who you are. It's like it's a mirror, and like you don't have like that feedback, that reflection back to who you are and who you like and who you want to be. And so what's happening? These young adults are not connecting, and they're also not forming a healthy identity or forming really in a very delayed identity around that.
Yeah. Well, that loneliness piece is really resonant. I believe the last Surgeon General was really talking about the mental health crisis and the loneliness piece of that. You also started this episode talking about snowboarding and mountain biking, and that you're doing that with friends in the outdoors. And I think the outdoors is a place where, one, you can't be distracted with your phone if you're active, right? If you're doing
Oh,
stuff.
well,
And two, for kinesthetic learners, it's better to be like you're walking or hiking or riding or whatever you're doing, you can actually access a better flow state to talk about harder issues. And
mm.
you I know that the Engage has, like, once a week does an outdoor component, and it was that intentional to help that process, or you're just like, "Well, I can only do a week inside." What brought the outdoor component to Engage, and what do you think about what I was just saying about your own experience in the outdoors?
Yeah, it's funny because every young adult gets a mountain bike or has an opportunity to get a mountain bike while you're at Engage. And when I tell people that, they're like, of course they do, Jack. Like they know me, they know mountain biking and stuff. And they also have
Wow.
an access or a season pass to Brian Head. And the
What?
intention, yeah, they get a season pass to Brian Head. They get a mountain bike. And we've got young adults that are like, man, I want a sicker bike. I want a bike that's got full suspension and I can actually take it off like drops and stuff like that. We've actually got young adults have got upgraded their bikes. And we've had young adults that get connected to the local mountain bike community and go mountain biking with the local bike shop. And I think the thing is, what I've learned over time is that with Engage, we just we threw it in there thinking everybody would be doing it. And I think over time, the intention of Engage is where we want to provide multiple experiential types of opportunities when it comes from clinical or outdoor kind of experiential opportunities or a clinical kind of experiences where, because certain things might click with certain other people, where we've had the outdoor clicks with certain young adults and it will keep them bought into the whole process. but it might be neurofeedback. It might be their relationship with their primary life coach. It might be their therapist. It might be the college. It might be whatever it is. And so the thing is, like, we realize that certain things are going to click with certain people, and then having that space is going to click is going to help them be bought into the other parts of the process in the program as well, too. Our thing is that we just want to get you outside. We understand vitamin D is really impactful for our own like physical development. And also too, like when you're engaging in the outdoors, you're like you said, like you mentioned, well, you're putting your phone down. You're getting out of that digital trance. And when you're in that digital trance, your frontal lobe is turned off. And you can't co-regulate, you can't connect, you can't really be with somebody when you're in a trance. And when you're when you're in that kind of like mode with your phone, whatever, you're not even really using all of your brain. You're just really stuck in that really primal part of the brain that trying to get that dopamine fix. And so you can't even really relate. And I think that also too, when you've been on the phone just a few minutes ago for the past hour, there's a delayed effect. It's like that residual tech is still there, getting in the van, getting out there, getting your gear together, focusing on that, getting outside, being distracted by the outside allows that space to connect, to really have that kind of co-regulation moment with somebody where your brain is really connecting, and stepping away from your phone. Being the outside is an opportunity for that. It could be hiking, it could be biking, it could be skiing or paddleboarding, wherever it's going to click. And sometimes it clicks differently for different people in that space.
Yeah. And also a lot of times people do outdoor activities with certain people. It's their people thing, right? Some people do it on their own to get in better shape. But then I was part of this running club, the White Mountain Milers, and then the Backcountry Ski Association. So it was the outdoor activities actually created more connection. And so, as you were saying, one of your students was there and he got associated with the bike shop. Well, he got associated with the people in the bike shop because if he didn't like those people, he probably wouldn't have been associated with the people. And so, you are probably part of what brings some people to engage transitions because of your high energy and your excitement of doing things. And what's the thing you like to do with the students in the outdoors the most? What's your favorite
Man,
activity with them
I think
outdoors?
I think like skiing and snowboarding. And there's a lot of executive functioning skills that are required to ski. It's managing your gear, organizing your gear, putting your gear on is a process in itself. There's a lot of executive functioning opportunities there. And there's also opportunities just to where dealing with like uncomfortableness, where it's cold. When you're skiing, it's cold. It could be windy. There's a lot of elements that are out of our control. And I think the thing is the uncertainty that skiing and snowboarding provides, and learning how to manage and accept uncertainty, things are out of your control, dealing with a rogue skier and dealing with the weather and the wind changing. And so there's a lot of opportunity for growth in that space, playing outside. And like one thing I've been really diving in lately is the book Anxious Generation.
By John
And
Haidt, a great book.
yeah, phenomenal book. And what's happening is that there's just not a lot of outdoor adventure happening with young people that's really impacting like their development. And the book talks about some research they did out of the biosphere. Remember that biosphere they did back in
So
I
they
don't know, the early 2000s or something like that. Do you remember that?
yeah, it was that, like, planetarium for humans isn't that what it's called, a planetarium? Like, an enclosed sphere where they put humans in to kinda see how they would do in that closed structure.
Yeah, it was, I think, a really failed experiment, but out of the failures, they learned a lot of things. And in that little biosphere, they were attempting to grow a tree, and the tree had perfect soil, perfect water, perfect fertilizer, but that tree didn't really grow because it didn't have the elements of outside and the wind and like the wind and the pressure of that tree to grow to be resilient. And so what happens is that like where a lot of like parents are overprotecting their kids from the outside world and then underprotecting their kids from the online world, which is so bass backwards when you think about it, Will. Like where we're so worried about the outside world, are they going to get hurt? And the reality is, as humans, we're anti-fragile and kids are anti-fragile. And so being outside, doing the snowboarding component, that's why I love where, because you can start learning to ski and be like, even with the beginner can be skiing with somebody who's an advanced person. So you're there, you have that bonding moment, you're falling down, you're having that moment of resiliency around that. And so that pressure, that resilience you learn from skiing, and then the progression of the growth and seeing your progress can be also a good reflection too. And so I really enjoy the snowboarding component. And unfortunately, man, the program has grown to a point where I'm just not able to do it like I used to, which I got to find a way to do it. So we've really devoted to a specific person that does our venture programming for our young adults to have that space, the planning around it. So, but yeah, snowboarding is definitely, and skiing is my favorite part of spending time in the outdoors with our young adults.
Well, having someone to do all the logistics is so key because as a group gets bigger and bigger, the needs. I have very beginner skiers and riders. You have very advanced and gear breaks, etc. So it's pretty hard to deal with all those things. And you're the executive director, so you've got other things that you need to be taking on. And this whole season on the podcast is all about boys and men, and I know that your program is co-ed, all genders, right? But I do wanna ask a couple questions about why do you think the outdoors is very powerful for young men who feel stuck, unmotivated, or struggling?
Young men struggle with the like vulnerability, being in the space of vulnerable. And we can, as we're talking about connection through this process, Will, is that you can't connect unless you're vulnerable. It's impossible. And I think being the outdoor component starts creating a space for young men to be vulnerable. And when you think about it with your vagus nerve, when you're walking, you're in that biorhythm, you're walking, just even hiking with somebody, you're starting to be in that kind of sympathy, like you're in that kind of, yeah, you're in that kind of like synchronicity of walking, and like you're walking together creates this synchronicity. And being just like, once again, getting away from your phone, getting out of that digital trance I talked about allows a space to be vulnerable. And and I think where that lack of vulnerability really creates a disconnection. And like I said, the outdoor piece really helps I think young men to be more vulnerable in relationships in the outdoor piece and to let their guard down.
I agree, and it's that left-right movement too that you talk about, and eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR, where you're going back and forth and back and forth. Marshall Lenehan, who did DBT, right, was talking
Totally.
about what's that?
Yeah. Linehan with DBT. Yeah. Yeah.
But she came up with the idea of by walking. When she was
Mm,
walking, she was like, "Oh, this sort of movement helps." And I think that there's leaders in industry. Steve Jobs used to have conversations walking loops. Part of the reason why they made that Apple new headquarters is a big loop to walk outdoors and around. And I believe a more effective meeting with a one-to-one is often walking with that person and being with that person. And I think men, especially neurodiverse men and women and all genders, actually, it's better not to be staring like this on a stream, but it's being side by side and looking at the world and getting into that flow state. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I remember like probably some of my best conversations have been in a car with somebody. Like you mentioned, not
Mm,
looking at somebody, like sitting there, you've been a parallel process and you're not
mm.
looking eye to eye. Yeah. I think it's really, I think a lot of people get pretty intimidated by just straight on eye contact sitting in an office. That's pretty intense. It's not an organic kind of like flowing conversation. And when you're outside walking with somebody, things just happen like it happens organically. Your defenses are down. You're more vulnerable. And in that parallel, I talked about the like co-regulating when you're really in a kind of like that kind of that flow state with somebody interpersonally, you're co-regulating. You're feeling the same thing as they are and having that outdoor piece. Because when you're also outdoors, you're also experiencing the same thing. You're experiencing what's happening around you. And there's that connection to that process too. And it's being outside because a lot of young people just are really missing out on unstructured play too, where towards not having an opportunity and having that unstructured play, that ability to be outside, that venture growing in that space really you also lack a sense of mastery. When you think about it, where we live in the world, right? I live in a world, I live in an environment, and the outdoors is a huge part of my environment. And if I don't feel a sense of mastery in my environment, how do you think that's going to impact the way I think about myself? So, there's certain people I just beeline to at conferences, and man, my like, I can't, man, help me. You know the person's name, Will. He owns Best Notes.
Oh, Nate Olson, Nathan Olson.
Nate Olson, yeah. You hear
Yeah.
stories about Nate Olson, about
Yeah.
walking on to a group of like young people out in the field, and literally he was out there living for days and catching fish with his hands and help building his own house and having a pet alligator and just having like him and his family have such a sense of mastery of the
Mm.
environment. And I just really admire people like that because when you feel like you can master your environment, it develops this internal confidence like no other. And so when you've got young people who are afraid of the outside, how do you think it affects how they feel a sense of mastery about living? And yeah, gosh, the other guy who used to be the executive director of Huntsman, I can't remember his name either. So I'm really bad with names. Well, you could tell I'm bad with
Oh,
names here.
yeah.
And
Huntsman
Hunts-
Academy, I don't know the executive director, no.
Huntsman Huntsman Institute, like it used to be
Oh,
called University of Utah's Neuropsychiatric Institute. But anyway,
oh,
the
yeah,
previous
yeah.
executive director would tell stories of like breaking down in the middle of India, but knowing how to like work on his car to figure out how to get going and knowing how to
Mm.
navigate your environment. And people who really know how to like have a sense of mastery of the outside feel like they can take on the world. Like, and they also feel like no matter what happens, they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And if you think about what our young people are missing out on when it comes to feeling the mastery of the outdoor, mastering the outside, mastering the outdoors, and how that's directly connecting to to their own mastery of themselves.
Yeah. That's really cool you brought that up. The other day, I was having a conversation with my wife about how, like, we all learned how to change our own oil and change your tires and work on your car because many years ago. And young people now, a lot of them, until recently, were able to get out of college and get a pretty decent job that paid a lot of
Mm,
money so they were like, "Oh, I don't need to do that." And who knows where the economy is going. That's when I got out of school, I was making minimum wage in the 80s working in a group home. Things change, and I couldn't agree with you more. And Nathan Olson, actually, that was a good lead in because he's going to be on the podcast next month or so. And he's on this season's episode of Alone. And he was one of my first interviews. I think it might be episode 5 of this
Is
podcast. And
is to be
yeah,
on alone,
yeah, he's on
alone?
this right now.
Oh
He's on it.
oh
The
my
History
gosh.
Channel. Yeah,
I
he's
That makes
surviving
so
so
much
far. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so amazing. I just
What drew you to Utah? Like, you're not from Utah, you said from the Southeast.
Yeah, I'm from Memphis, and like I said, I made a couple friends who are Mormon. They were like, we're gonna go to BYU, and I followed them along because we got really into mountain biking. I had a friend that went out and visited his brother one summer and went mountain biking and bought a mountain bike. And he came back from his summer trip and go, "Hey, Jack, you got to get a mountain bike." And so I bought a mountain bike. And so this is like in the late 80s, before, this is right when mountain biking started. We're using like road bike components on our mountain bike to make it
Mhm.
work. And it was like fully rigid bikes, and you're going down crazy like trails that weren't really built for mountain biking. And so it was just my love for mountain biking. And will, to this day, I never saw the Rocky Mountains until I was around 18 or 19 years old. And I remember driving out west. I mean, literally, I could still see those mountains for the very first time driving through, like passing west of Denver on I-70. And I looked at those mountains. I looked over to my friend in the car. We're driving out to Utah. I'm like, you know what? If I can, I'm going to try to live as long as I can. Not like, I cannot live east of Denver. It's got to be
Oh,
west of Denver. And just fell in love with the mountains and the connection with biking. That's how I got out west, is meeting some Mormon buddies who went out to BYU.
wow. Is that
Mhm.
where you went to college? Where did you go to school?
Yeah, I went to UVU or UVSC at the time, and then met a girl, and then I followed a girl to Westminster College, and then I ended up meeting a different girl at Westminster College and met my wife. And then I went to grad school in Springfield, Missouri, which is, I had to do a little hiatus from the mountains, but it was in the Ozark Mountains. And if you can ride your bike over the mountain in a couple hours, it's not a mountain. It's just a big hill. So the big
Okay.
Ozark hills. But of course I found mountain biking in the Ozarks. There's great mountain biking. I don't want to downplay it but yeah, went to grad school. And actually, I think I rode my bike more than I ever did when I was in grad school. Joined a mountain bike race team and a road bike race team, and did a lot of riding. And so back to that thread, that the cycling, mountain biking has been a huge thread. And then literally, Will, yesterday, I was out mountain biking with buddies and up in northern Utah. Yeah.
Yeah, I got really turned on to the mountain biking scene in the early '80s. I was living in Colorado, going to the University of Colorado Boulder, and then I was road racing for a couple years, and then I went into I was in some of the first mountain bike races, and it was those fixed forks and all that. Ooh, it was rough. Now you ride those things and like, yeah, this is great. It's much lighter, but everybody was like wearing the chamois shorts they were wool and the helmets were big bell helmets, but it was good times.
Yeah. You talk about how, like, I've been thinking a lot about this concept of barrier to entry. And I was having a conversation with my son because we were up in northern Utah, and he was also there for a college orientation, but he also was up there for a mountain bike race. And
Mm.
he was just, I was just reflecting on, we're talking about this idea of barrier to entry, where like the bikes were hard to ride. You didn't have hydraulic disc brakes. You didn't have 160 millimeters of travel. Now you got amazing e-bikes that will easily take you up to the hill. If you wanted a mountain bike back in the 80s and 90s, it was hard. The barrier of entry was really difficult. And it's interesting how certain these, like, even, which kind of just reminds me of this concept of barrier to entry in relationships, where technology is really developing a skewed concept of barrier to entry to relationships. And do you want me to keep on talking about this? Well, I see your
Yeah,
face. I'm
this is
looking at you right
cool.
now.
This is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. I was just thinking about mountain biking, barrier to entry, relationship connections, barrier to entry, where I think another piece is really playing out about connection relationships. I talk about community, is that, think about an online community. How easy is it for me to join an online community? Well,
Very.
simple. I just got to get into a group, a Discord group. So there's no work to get into that kind of online connection group. I don't even have to I don't even have to be an age. I don't even have to be a gender or anything really to be in a group. And so the barrier to entry is really low. But what if I make a mistake and say something wrong or type something wrong? What's the barrier to entry of me getting kicked out of that group, or barrier of exit really
Can
high?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, really low. I'm sorry, really low. Yeah.
It's very
Getting in?
quick. It can be like this,
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah, in and out. And so what's happening is that a lot of young adults, their concept of connection and community is being formed around this low barrier of entry and a low barrier of exit, which is very opposite in real relationships. If I wanted to be a part of a mountain bike group, I got to go buy a mountain bike. I got to learn how to buy a mountain bike and ride a mountain bike, or I've got to get hiking shoes, or to be in a group. It takes resiliency and skills to be part of a relationship. And then if I'm showing up to a hiking group and I do something awkward and weird, they're just not going to tell me to you, like to get out of the group. I have to work through that. I have to apologize for whatever, like bringing the wrong gear that day, whatever. So the thing is, like, where there's that concept of low barrier of entry and a low barrier of exit is being applied into real relationships. So young adults are not knowing how to form natural, not offline relationships. And they're really quickly to boot people out and call them toxic and pushing them out because of the process that plays out online. And so that's like where I'm seeing a lot of young adults. And so what happens is if I'm a goofy young person trying to like figure out boundaries and everything else, and I cross a boundary, which is like normal part of like development for young adults to build relationships, people quickly call me toxic or wrong, and I get booted out. And I don't even have a self-esteem, but my self-esteem is so small. I try to build a connection with people. If somebody kicks me out of the group very quickly, and it just decimates myself and my self-esteem to connect that. And so I think it's another component that's playing out with relationships and barrier of entry.
That's really interesting. And I would imagine it must, when a young person goes to engage, they're coming from away, right? And that barrier, they have to adjust to it. And how long are is a typical client in your program?
It's about 9 months to a year, give or take.
Now, once they get used to that, and so once they gone through the barrier of entry, how many stay in the area? Because you did a really good job at the beginning of the episode of saying, "This is where we are. You can mountain bike all day, and or the next day ski all day." So, how many stay around because they get comfortable being there?
Which is really cool. As we're growing, as we've been around longer, we're starting to see a lot more young adults stay. I would say maybe up to a third, and so, and as we are, like I said, around longer, that number is increasing because that community now is more increasing in Cedar City. And so, yeah, we give young adults who were at other four-year colleges and other parts of the country and realize like, man, I want to finish my undergrad here. I actually want to go to school here. I've got a connection with the college. I got a connection with Engage, and we provide alumni support to our young adults. So we're
Mm,
Engage Light. We're available, and we provide 24-hour on-call support if needed. It's like an alumni plan for the young adult, but a peace of mind plan for the parent. So we're there
mm,
available. We've had one young lady literally moved next door to us. There's like student housing next to one of our houses, and she moved next door to one of our houses for a little bit. And she
wow.
was in that house for a while. Then she moved into another place, like a little bit closer to like down the street. And but yeah, it's cool to see our alumni that kind of come and go and are really able to come and be part of the community. And like with our barbecues we're doing, they still have access to the outdoor piece. They still have access to our case manager, those things. And so just having that base available is very soothing to young people.
Mm.
You think about where, yeah, I can see my therapist if I need to, if I need to go see my case manager, if I'm having a really rough day, I can just show up to Engage and hang out in the living room and play Smash Brothers with the other young adults, or I'll talk to the adventure person and find out what they're doing that Thursday to go along. And so as like community, the power of your program is your community. And so that the young adults who finish the program are still part of the community really help support the clients are newer in the program as well.
Do you have a story you're willing to share about an outdoor experience that was pretty powerful for yourself or one of the clients that engage?
Yeah, we have a lot of our young adults have been in lots of treatment, Like they've been in through residential treatment as an adolescent, and maybe have gone to an outdoor program, then went to an RTC, and really are burnt out on therapy or sick of therapy. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I got to do this all over again in another quote unquote program. And so we have a young adult that is neurodivergent, been in lots of therapy, and getting him a mountain bike was a game changer. And where we even upgraded his mountain bike because he just got more and more into it. And that connection with the adventure person in our program really led him to be bought into something, which gave time and space for him to connect with his therapist to actually do some really deep work. And so I think he really he's been so resistant to therapy, where but being connected in the outdoor piece helped time build with this connection with his therapist. So there's two things that were happening at that same time. And then that young adult now is living in his own apartment in Cedar City. I see him cruise around on his bike. He stops by Engage. Yeah, he's going to Southern Utah University here. Yeah.
Nice. Well, you're someone who's worked with young adults for years, and what advice would you give to parents or professionals who are seeing a young man disengage or withdraw from how do you advise parents?
For one thing, anxiety is normal. What's happening is that there's been one thing we always know, there's a pendulum swings and everything. Swings in our political environment and swings with it just, so we had this pendulum where you and I grow up, where maybe was not that like safe and not that therapeutic. And I think now our generation and maybe my parents, a little bit the baby boomers on the end of the baby boomers were overcompensating for like the concept of self-esteem. And what happens is this pendulum was swung over to the idea of, I'm really glad that we're talking about therapy. I'm really glad we're talking about anxiety, but the consequences of that is now anxiety has been seen as something pathological, something to avoid. And I think one thing I can really speak to parents is that anxiety is a part of life. And I think there's a lot of times parents are misinterpreting anxiety as something to eliminate. When you think about, I use the biosphere, the tree example, like you have to have pressure to grow. Like you have to have anxiety to grow. And of course there's like diagnosable like anxiety that's very debilitating, but there's healthy anxiety. There's moderate stress. And I think a lot of times parents don't know what that space is. And research has indicated that you need to have anxiety to actually create new brain connections. Like when you think about it, when you ever like studied really hard, like you felt like you can almost feel like your brain hurting because your brain was making new neural connections. It's not comfortable. And so going back to this idea that like we need anxiety, it's part of life. And parents are like, as we know, are too quickly to remove that discomfort and then unintentionally short circuit the development of that resiliency. And so parents are super anxious themselves. We're seeing a lot more anxious parents, and they're debilitated by their anxiety. And so their ability to be okay with their kids' anxiety is super low. So there's a parallel process of like poor coping for parents, poor coping for the actual young adult too, where leaning into that. And like I mentioned earlier, where is that parents are so overprotective of the outdoor world and so underprotective of online. Like you're more likely to be abused through a connection you made online than being out on your bicycle, like riding down your neighborhood. We've had such a skewed perception of risk, really skewed perception of risk. And kids are not experiencing risk. And it's really delaying their brain development. Like Haidt talks about, if you're born from 1995 on, Will, your brain is different. Like they have different brains than ours because of that exposure. So yeah, I think we made anxiety a bad word. I'm anxious. I can't do it.
Yeah, and the challenge is to do it anyways, right? That's exposure response prevention therapy, ERP, is to here's the feeling, or mindfulness, or a lot of therapies talk about, yes, you have this feeling and you'll survive, push through instead of retreating. And that's what you're teaching at Engage Transitions, I'm assuming.
Totally, exactly. And that process is different for every single person at Engage.
Well,
And like we've typically have about 16 to 18 young adults. And I frequently tell parents, tell young adults, which means we have 16 to 18 different process and programs. And that's where the case managers come into play to really help that with coordinating all those pieces. Because we got some young adults that maybe are really lean into neurofeedback. And then like the outdoor component, we've had, and so it's just trying to make it click for different people. And that degree of exposure looks differently for different people in different ways.
so well said, and a great way to end the episode. What is the website for Engage Transitions?
It's engagelifenow.com, www.engagelifenow.com.
Well, Dr. Jack Hinman, thank you so much for sharing your story on Stories from the Field.
Thanks, Will. It was awesome. It was great to get to connect with you, talk about community, talk about connection. And I look forward to more of these conversations with you in the future.
Yeah, let's do that.